Welcome to the Reflections podcast, where we reflect on the writings of the Fathers of the Faith. In this episode, we are discussing Augustine's City of God, a popular and well-loved book from 426 AD. We have two questions going into this discussion. First, did we get it right? As in, did we accurately represent Augustine and his book, City of God, to you? And then second, do you agree with Augustine? Let us know. This book and more are available in the description below the video via an affiliated link. Here we go.
Welcome back to Reflections, where we reflect on the writings of the Fathers of the Faith. And today we're diving into Augustine's City of God.
Oh, one of the most influential works of Christian thought ever.
It's a massive text, so we've got quite a challenge ahead of us, but I'm really excited to, I'm excited to see what we find.
It's incredibly timely, even though it was written over 1,600 years ago.
Absolutely.
I mean, imagine the Roman Empire in 410 AD reeling from the shock of the Visigoths sacking Rome.
Right.
Pagans were quick to blame the Christians,
Of course.
for abandoning the old gods and, in their eyes, weakening the empire.
Yeah, makes sense.
And City of God is Augustine's direct response to these accusations, but it goes so much deeper than just defending Christianity.
Oh, for sure.
It grapples with some pretty heavy questions, like the nature of good and evil, human desire,
Right.
the purpose of history.
So right off the bat in Book 1, Augustine sets the stage with this dramatic scene of pagans pointing fingers at Christians for the fall of Rome.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he uses their own history and logic to dismantle their arguments.
He really does.
Like he's practically throwing their words right back at them.
Yeah.
Pointing out all the calamities Rome suffered long before Christianity even entered the picture.
Yeah.
He uses examples from Roman history to highlight
Right.
that their problems were homegrown,
Yeah.
not some divine punishment for converting to Christianity.
It's like, come on, guys, you had problems way before we got here.
Exactly.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me was the story he tells about the sack of Rome,
Oh, yeah?
where many pagans actually sought refuge in Christian churches.
Right. And get this.
Yeah.
The invading Goths who had some respect for Christianity spared those who were sheltered there.
It's amazing.
It really flips the script, doesn't it?
Totally. It challenges that simple narrative of Christians as the cause of Rome's downfall.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows how Augustine masterfully uses these historical details to support his argument.
Yes.
And then he takes it a step further in Book 2.
Okay.
He critiques the pagan gods,
Okay.
questioning if they actually promote virtue
Interesting.
or even manage to restrain their followers' worst impulses.
Which is,
It's a bit ironic, considering how often the Romans condemned the very vices their gods supposedly celebrated.
that's a great point. It's like they're saying, do as we say, not as our gods do.
Exactly.
So he uses this comparison between Roman law and the behavior of their gods to highlight the hypocrisy inherent in pagan beliefs.
Yeah, and he brings in Sallust,
Oh, right.
who's a Roman historian, not a Christian,
Right.
to describe Rome's moral decline,
Wow.
emphasizing that this was happening centuries before Christianity.
He's really drawing on all kinds of sources to make his point.
It's a brilliant strategy.
It is.
By using pagan sources to critique their own beliefs,
Yeah.
he adds weight to his argument and forces them to confront their own contradictions.
Okay, so we've seen him tackle the accusations of Christian culpability head on.
Right.
But then in Book 3,
Yeah.
on the external calamities which befell the Romans before Christ and under the Christian emperors alike, Augustine turns to the argument that Christianity brought about Rome's external misfortunes.
Right, because the argument was that Rome was flourishing under the pagan gods and that Christianity weakened them.
Makes sense?
But Augustine dismantles this by listing all the external calamities Rome suffered, even during its supposed golden age.
Like what?
Famines, plagues,
Oh, wow.
wars, crushing defeats. It's a pretty grim catalog.
Yeah, I have to admit, some of those examples were captivating, like the story of the Codden Forks.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, imagine the humiliation of those once mighty Roman legions forced to surrender and pass under the yoke.
It's not exactly the picture of divine favor, is it?
Not at all.
It definitely paints a different picture of Rome's invincibility. And with each example, Augustine chips away at this idea that the pagan gods were responsible for Roman success.
Right, it makes you think.
It does.
If the gods were so powerful, why didn't they intervene to prevent these disasters?
Exactly.
Which leads us perfectly into Book 4. That empire was granted to the Romans, not by any of their gods, but by the one true God. It's like he's saying, okay, if it wasn't the Christian God who caused these problems, which of your many gods was responsible for Rome's success in the first place?
And that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
He starts poking fun at the sheer number of deities in the Roman pantheon.
Yeah, there are a lot.
He uses the example of numerous agricultural deities,
Okay.
each in charge of a tiny specific aspect of farming.
Right.
I mean, it's funny, but it really highlights the absurdity of this complex web of gods and their overlapping powers.
It's like they needed a spreadsheet just to keep track of who did what.
Exactly.
And then he tackles the goddesses Fortune and Felicity,
Oh, yes.
who were supposed to be the givers of luck and happiness. But Augustine argues that these are actually gifts from the true God, subtly shifting the focus away from the Roman pantheon to a higher power.
Yeah, he's planting seeds of doubt, you know,
Yeah.
raising questions that challenge the foundation of their beliefs.
It makes you wonder if those worshiping Fortune were looking in the wrong place all along.
He's just getting started.
Takes on a subject that still resonates today.
Oh, absolutely.
Astrology and fate. And remember, back then, the belief that the stars determined your destiny was widespread.
Right?
But Augustine argues against this,
Yeah.
rejecting the idea that our lives are predetermined by celestial movements.
He uses a simple but brilliant example. Twins.
Oh, yeah.
They're born under the same horoscope, yet they often lead very different lives, make different choices, have different personalities.
Right.
If the stars truly dictated everything, wouldn't their paths be identical?
That's a great point.
And it reinforces Augustine's emphasis on human free will and God's providence as forces more powerful than any supposed influence of the stars.
So he's reminding us that we have agency in our lives.
He's not letting us off easy, though.
How so?
By emphasizing free will, he also underscores our responsibility for our actions and the choices we make.
That's a good point.
And this leads us into a rather dense section. Books 6 through 8.
Oh, yeah. These books feel like a deep dive into a deep dive.
In Book 6 of Varro's distribution of the theology of the pagans, he delves into the writings of Varro,
Okay.
who was a Roman scholar who attempted to organize and explain Roman beliefs.
So he's like, let's take a look at your most well-respected expert and see if his analysis holds up.
Exactly.
Clever.
And it's fascinating how Augustine uses Varro's own work to expose the inherent contradictions in Roman religion.
Right.
Varro identified 3 types of theology: mythical, civil, and natural. Augustine uses this framework to dissect each one and, as you might expect, finds them all wanting in the face of Christian truth.
What struck me was how even Varro, while trying to defend Roman religion, inadvertently highlighted its weaknesses.
It's like his efforts to systematize these beliefs only made their flaws more apparent,
Yeah.
ultimately pointing towards the need for a single, supreme God.
Okay, now things take a slightly darker turn as we head into Books 7 and 8
Right.
of the origin and end of the 2 cities, and that the gods of the pagans never avail for the salvation of their worshipers, but rather for their deception.
We're entering the realm of demons and the supernatural.
Okay.
It's where Augustine really lays out his vision of the 2 cities. The earthly city,
Okay.
focused on self-love and worldly desires.
Yeah.
The heavenly city, built on love of God.
And he connects this to the fall of the angels.
Yeah, where pride led some to turn away from God, becoming the demons we were just talking about.
So it's like this cosmic drama started way back then,
Yeah.
and it's still unfolding.
With us humans having to choose which side we're on.
And this is where his discussion of demons becomes so crucial.
He argues that despite their claims of power, they're actually fallen angels,
Okay.
motivated by envy and deceit.
So they're not all powerful.
Not at all. They're tricksters, always trying to lead us astray.
So he's drawing a clear line between the deceptive power of demons and the true power of God.
Like he's saying, choose wisely because the stakes are high.
And that's where we'll leave it for now.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground in just the first 8 books,
We have.
but I'm already sensing a recurring theme here.
Oh, yeah.
Augustine masterfully dismantles the arguments against Christianity while simultaneously building a compelling case for his own worldview.
And he's doing it by drawing on history, philosophy,
Yeah.
and even a bit of psychology.
It's fascinating
It really is.
to see how he weaves all of these threads together to create this cohesive and dare I say, entertaining argument.
I know, right?
It's definitely not what I expected from a 1,600-year-old theological treatise.
You and me both.
But we'll dive into the next section of City of God in Part 2, where we'll see how Augustine further develops his ideas about the two cities, human history,
Right.
and the ultimate destiny of humanity.
Can't wait.
Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Reflections.
We're continuing our
Exploration of Augustine's City of God.
last time we left off with Augustine's vision of the two cities and his foray into the world of demons.
Yes, it can get pretty spooky.
It can.
So it's important to remember that framework of the two cities.
Yeah.
The earthly city founded on love of self, and the heavenly city founded on love of God.
Right. As we delve into the next section,
Right.
It's the lens through which Augustine interprets
History?
history and human nature.
So picking up with Book 9,
Okay.
that the angels fell through pride, and that this was the beginning of all sins.
Things get pretty epic.
They do.
Augustine connects the two cities back to the fall of the angels, highlighting how pride led some to turn away from God, becoming the demons he talked about earlier.
So he's laying out the origin of evil.
Exactly. And it's not some external force,
Right.
but a twisting of the good,
Okay.
a turning away from God.
Interesting.
And that choice
Yeah.
between self-love and love of God
Mm,
plays out on the human stage as well,
right.
shaping the two cities.
It's like this cosmic drama
Started way back then
Yeah.
and is still unfolding.
with us humans having to choose which side we're on.
That the saints are even now blessed in hope.
Mhm.
Augustine takes a deep dive into the nature of happiness
Okay.
and argues that true happiness can't be found in earthly things.
Interesting.
He dismantles this idea that worldly success, pleasure, or power can bring lasting fulfillment.
Yeah, I could see that.
They're all fleeting and ultimately unsatisfying.
Right.
True happiness for Augustine comes from union with God.
So you're saying all those emperors and conquerors obsessed with earthly power and glory were actually missing out on the real deal.
It's a pretty radical idea,
It is.
especially in the context of the Roman Empire, where worldly success was so highly valued.
Absolutely. And he's not just philosophizing here.
No.
In Book 11 of the creation of angels and men and Book 12 of the fall of the first man and the origin of the two cities, he ties this all back to the creation of the world and the fall of humanity.
Right. He goes back to the Garden of Eden,
Okay.
highlighting how Adam and Eve's sin of disobedience introduced sin and death into the world,
Right.
corrupting human nature and setting the stage for the conflict between the two cities.
So it's like this original act of self-love.
Yeah.
Choosing their own desires over God's will
Yeah.
started a ripple effect that we're still feeling today.
He's connecting the dots,
Yeah.
showing how this story from the very beginning of human history explains the state of the world and the choices we face.
Okay, so we've got the fall of angels, the fall of man, and these two cities battling it out across history. It's starting to feel a bit overwhelming. But then Augustine shifts gears in Book 13.
Okay.
Whether death, which God did not make, was penal to man before he sinned. And he tackles the weighty subject of death.
He gets really philosophical here,
Yeah.
exploring what death actually is.
Okay.
He argues that death wasn't part of God's original plan,
Right.
but entered the world as a consequence of sin.
Interesting.
And it's not just physical death he's talking about,
Right.
but also spiritual death, separation from God.
Okay, so it's a pretty bleak picture.
It is.
But then he offers a glimmer of hope of the pains of childbirth, wherein it appeared that we were by nature children of wrath.
Okay.
He introduces the idea of redemption through Christ,
Right.
who conquers death, and offers the possibility of eternal life in the heavenly city.
He's weaving together his theological ideas with his philosophical exploration of the human condition.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff,
It is.
but ultimately hopeful. He delves into the tricky topic of free will.
Oh yeah, free will.
He argues that God gave us free will so that we could choose to love and serve him freely, but that also means we can choose to turn away from him.
He's emphasizing human responsibility amidst this grand cosmic drama.
So we're not just pawns in a game.
Or not.
We have the ability to make choices that shape our destiny and determine which city we align with. Okay.
Of the origin of the two cities, the earthly and the heavenly. Here, Augustine delves deeper into the historical development of the two cities.
Okay.
He uses the biblical narrative of Cain and Abel.
Right.
Remember, Cain, driven by envy and pride, murders his brother Abel.
Yes, of course.
Augustine interprets this as a symbolic representation of the two cities at war from the very beginning.
It's fascinating how he connects this ancient story to his larger framework.
He does.
Cain representing the earthly city, focused on worldly gain and driven by self-interest.
Yeah.
Abel symbolizing the heavenly city,
Right.
focused on righteousness and obedience to God.
And that conflict continues to play out throughout history.
So, of the progress of the two cities, he traces their development
From the flood,
to the Tower of Babel.
he sees the flood as a judgment on the wickedness of the earthly city,
Okay.
and the scattering of people at Babel as a result of their prideful attempt to reach heaven through their own efforts.
So he's saying that this tension between the two cities is woven into the very fabric of human history,
Exactly.
shaping the rise and fall of empires, the conflicts between nations,
Right.
and even the struggles within our own hearts.
It's a powerful idea.
It is. Before the coming of Christ in the flesh.
Where Augustine examines different philosophical and religious traditions in light of his two cities framework.
This is where his vast knowledge of history and philosophy really shines.
It does.
He delves into the ideas of Plato, other Greek philosophers, and even Roman religion.
It's like he's saying, look, there have been many noble attempts to understand the world and find meaning,
Right.
but ultimately they all fall short of the truth revealed in Christ.
It's a bold statement.
It is, but he backs it up.
With his trademark wit.
Yes, exactly.
Of the origins and kingly character of the two cities, there's a definite shift in tone.
Yeah.
It feels like Augustine, having laid out the origin and development of the two cities, turns his attention to their ultimate destinies.
He gets pretty intense here,
I can imagine.
describing the eternal bliss of the heavenly city,
Okay.
where the saints will dwell with God in perfect love and harmony,
Right.
and the eternal torment of the damned in hell,
Ooh, that's heavy.
separated from God and consumed by their own wickedness.
I know some people find this idea of eternal punishment hard to swallow.
I understand.
But remember, Augustine was writing in a time of great upheaval and uncertainty.
True.
The sack of Rome had shaken people to their core, and they were looking for answers.
Right.
Augustine offered them a stark choice between two paths, two ultimate destinies,
It was a call to choose wisely.
to live in light of eternity.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this cosmic drama playing out, the two cities on their separate paths, headed for their ultimate destinies.
But what does this mean for us now?
Yeah, here in the earthly city.
That's the question Augustine tackled of the peace which the earthly city has or desires, and of the peace which is peculiar to the heavenly city.
Okay.
He outlines the principles of peace and justice that should guide the lives of Christians, even as they navigate the complexities of the earthly city.
So he acknowledges that we can't fully escape the conflicts and temptations of the world,
We can't.
but he emphasizes the importance of striving for righteousness,
Yeah.
practicing love and forgiveness,
Mhm.
and seeking the welfare of our neighbors.
Even those who might be considered our enemies.
It's a tall order.
It is.
He also offers guidance on how Christians should engage with earthly authorities. He argues for a kind of dual citizenship,
Okay.
where we obey the laws of the land as long as they don't conflict with our allegiance to God.
It's a nuanced approach
It is.
to the relationship between faith and politics.
And it's still relevant today.
Absolutely.
I'm struck by how Augustine manages to hold these two seemingly contradictory ideas together.
Yeah.
That the earthly city is flawed and destined to fall,
Mm-hmm.
but that we still have a responsibility to work for justice and peace within it.
It's a delicate balance,
It is.
and one that requires careful discernment.
So he's not advocating for passivity or withdrawal from the world,
Right.
but rather a thoughtful engagement.
That recognizes both the limitations and possibilities of earthly existence.
And with that in mind, we come to the final stretch of our journey. These books focus on the ultimate triumph of the city of God.
He describes the resurrection of the dead, the final judgment,
Yeah.
and the establishment of God's eternal kingdom, where all things will be made new.
It's a pretty stunning vision,
It is.
filled with imagery of perfect beauty, harmony, and joy, where suffering and death are finally vanquished.
He connects this ultimate victory to the sacrifice of Christ.
Yep.
Seeing the crucifixion and resurrection as pivotal events in the cosmic drama,
Right.
the turning point in the battle between good and evil.
It's a powerful message of hope and consolation,
It is.
reminding us that despite the struggles and uncertainties of this present life,
Mm-hmm.
there's a greater reality, a higher purpose, a destiny that awaits those who align themselves with the city of God.
So as we wrap up part 2 of Dive into City of God,
Right.
we've journeyed through Augustine's philosophical and theological arguments,
Okay.
explored the historical development of the two cities,
Mm-hmm.
and even glimpsed the ultimate triumph of the heavenly city.
But we're only halfway through.
I know, right?
Exploring Augustine's ideas about the nature of the church, eternal life, and the ultimate destiny of humanity.
Can't wait.
Stay tuned for the final chapter of our exploration of Augustine's masterpiece. Welcome back to Reflections, fellow travelers, through the city of God.
We're in the home stretch now.
I know, it's hard to believe we're already on part 3.
I'm still amazed by Augustine's vision.
Me too. His intellect and the depth of his thought is just incredible.
He brings together philosophy, theology, history, personal reflection. It's really an intricate tapestry.
It is, and in these remaining books,
Yeah.
he grapples with some really complex concepts.
So
Okay.
of the eternity of the two cities,
Right.
we're thrust into the realm of eternity.
That's a big jump.
It is. And Augustine lays out his vision of the ultimate destinies of these two cities.
Okay, so the earthly city
Faces eternal punishment.
and the heavenly city.
Eternal bliss.
He's not just talking about physical places, right?
More like states of being.
Okay, I see.
The earthly city, characterized by self-love and separation from God, finds its end in eternal separation from him.
And the heavenly city.
Marked by love of God and communion with him, experiences eternal joy and fulfillment in his presence.
It really makes you think about the choices we make,
It does.
and how they have implications far beyond our earthly existence.
And then in the Last Judgment, Augustine walks us through that final judgment,
Okay.
that moment when all of humanity will stand before God
Right.
and be judged.
It's a powerful image.
He paints a vivid picture,
Yeah.
Angels, trumpets, a separation of the sheep from the goats.
It's a reminder that our actions have consequences.
And that we will be held accountable for how we lived our lives.
It's intense, but it really makes you think.
And it leads naturally into his discussion of the resurrection.
Oh, okay. Against the Platonists, who argued from the nature of the soul, against the resurrection of the body, and of the resurrection of the flesh, against the Porphyrians.
Augustine takes on those who denied the resurrection of the body.
Interesting. He was really facing opposition on this,
Oh, yeah. He argued that it was an essential part of Christian faith.
using both philosophical arguments and biblical evidence.
Right. Emphasizing that God will restore our bodies in a perfected form, free from decay and suffering.
I was struck by his response to the Platonists, who believed that the soul was immortal, but the body was just a prison.
He argued that the body is an integral part of who we are,
Right.
created by God.
And destined for resurrection,
He was affirming the goodness of the physical world and the dignity of the human body.
which was pretty radical at the time.
Very radical.
So this affirmation of the body leads into his exploration of eternal life. Okay.
Of the state of the body after the resurrection and of the eternity of the Sabbath.
It sounds beautiful,
It is. Augustine paints a beautiful picture of the heavenly city.
where the saints will dwell with God.
Right. In perfect communion, free from pain, sorrow, and limitations.
It's like a vision that has inspired so much
Art, literature, it captures that human longing.
for peace and happiness.
And Augustine connects this eternal Sabbath to the concept of true worship,
Yeah.
arguing that our ultimate purpose is to glorify God and enjoy him forever.
Then, of the end or purpose of the creation of things, especially of man, Augustine takes a step back and considers the purpose of creation itself.
He argues that God created everything for his own glory and
Yeah.
that humanity was created in his image.
To reflect that glory
Exactly. He's emphasizing the interconnectedness of all things.
and the centrality of God,
So it's a reminder that our lives are not just about our own pursuits
but about our relationship with God.
and our role in his grand design.
And that leads us into his discussion of the nature of evil.
Of the nature of good contrasted with evil.
He revisits his earlier point,
Yeah, that evil is not a substance,
but a privation of good.
a turning away from God.
He really digs into this concept.
Explaining how even things that appear evil can ultimately serve a good purpose in God's plan.
That's a tough one.
It is, especially when we're faced with suffering and injustice.
Right, but he's saying that God can even use evil to bring about good.
And that his goodness will ultimately prevail.
Okay, so finally, we reach the concluding books. Whether the angels know all things which take place in time, and of the seventh day, when God rested from all his works.
Augustine explores the nature of angels and their role.
It's a fascinating look into the angelic realm.
It is, and their connection to the human story.
And it culminates in Augustine's reflection on the seventh day of creation,
The Sabbath rest.
foreshadowing the eternal Sabbath of the heavenly city,
He ends with a powerful image,
of God resting in the completion of his creation,
a vision of peace and harmony.
pointing toward the ultimate fulfillment of all things.
It's been quite a journey.
Really has. We've covered so much ground.
Augustine's arguments about history, philosophy, theology, and the human condition.
I'm still amazed by how relevant City of God is today.
After all these centuries, his insights into good and evil, the human heart, and the hope of redemption.
They still resonate.
So I hope our deep dive has sparked a desire in you
Yes.
to explore Augustine's work even further.
To discover the treasures within its pages
Thanks for joining us
on this incredible journey.
through one of the most influential works of Christian thought.
Until next time,
Keep reflecting
keep exploring.
and keep seeking wisdom in the words of the past.
Stay tuned next week for another discussion also on Augustine. Bye for now.